Afternoon, General Charles Flynn, Commander, U.S. Army Pacific.
Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see all of you. If you don't mind, I'm going to keep that bottle of water up here. I've been flying around in a helicopter for a little bit, so. Well, listen, let me, thanks to Jeff and Linda and Susan, good to see you again. Paul, good to see you. Appreciate the team here being able to pull this group together. It's important that we get industry together, we get allies and partners together, get teams together to solve, just really, really complex problems that we're confronted with. So a couple of thoughts here, and then I'll probably talk for about 15, 20 minutes, and then take 10, 15 minutes of questions, or until somebody starts giving me the hook and you guys get on with the rest of your afternoon. But I do think that at the rate that technology is advancing, it's really important that forums like this come together and try to create some solutions, because forums like this, they end up birthing new ideas, right? They bring new ideas to technology. They help us with national security matters. They help us with our digital capabilities, and they sort of look inside and outside the organizations to be able to help us solve these really, really complex problems, because technology is just advancing at a rate we just can't keep our hands around it. So I do want to start with some of the challenges that I think that many people are waking up to the security challenges of the globe today. So a couple things: poverty, economic uncertainty, human and illicit trafficking, political unrest, lawlessness, energy squeezes, tech theft, of which many of you in this room are probably aware of. I mean, all of these things are ongoing, and they're becoming more and more prominent. And I would just say that here in the Indo-Pacific, those challenges exist. And in the Indo-Pacific, and what I mean by the Indo-Pacific, I'll talk about the continent of Asia, because this is, in my view, the most consequential theater at the most consequential time, and has the greatest aspects of this are at stake right now. I mean, I think we either advance what we're doing or we get behind, and the further we get behind, the more challenging it's going to be. And so even as many people focus on the Russian invasion and the Ukraine, the geostrategic weight of the globe and the activities across the globe, they're concentrated in Asia. So 2/3 of the global economy is here. 6 out of 10 people that live on the globe live here. In about 10 to 15 years, 7 out of 10 people actually live here. From Vietnam to Pakistan, the South Asian part of the Asian continent, that is nearly 2 billion people. 2 billion people. And the flashpoints that exist in that piece of this region and on the Asian continent are substantial. And so we've got increased Russian aggression. You have destabilizing activities that are evolving out here and continuing to evolve. You have nuclear threats and tests out of North Korea. You have violent extremism, and then you have the rise of China. And I'll be very clear about the Communist Chinese Party. They remain the primary challenge out here. And the implications of what's unfolding in Europe and the Ukraine and with Russia, Taiwan is watching that, but also so is China. And we should be as well. And China has been on a trajectory of growth that's pretty extraordinary. And I would categorize it as an insidious, an incremental path to achieve their goals regionally, and then they have global aspirations. Their assertive and aggressive behaviors are resulting and manifest themselves into things like hardening along the line of actual control in India, incursions in Bhutan, damming along the Mekong River Delta, unrest in places like Myanmar. There is an element of their build out of the Belt Road Initiative. Part of that Belt Road Initiative is what I would call a digital Silk Road over the top of that. And so these activities by our adversaries in this region are creating unrest. And they're having profound effects, not just here regionally, but across the globe. So in that context, I'm going to offer to you why the Army matters in the Pacific and the value that land power brings. So often when I talk, the elephant in the room a lot of times is, well, when you look on the map, you see a lot of blue, and there's an awful lot of air, and there's an awful lot of sea there. And so the natural reaction is, well, the Navy, this is a theater that requires the Navy and the Air Force, and it certainly does. But I'm going to offer my response to that through a different lens, and I'm going to give you two views through that lens. The first one is just a pragmatic one. You see, if you look at the map and you zoom in too close, sometimes you lose perspective. But when you zoom out, at least what I see is that there's a lot of land out there. And as I mentioned to you, the numbers of the population as well, right? So people have this really unique tendency to live on land. It's where their wealth is, right? And there's a competition on land. And that competition on land is over fresh water, food, and minerals to run factories so that people can get up every day and go to work. And so wealth, decisions, leaders, and national sovereignty is on land. And that's one aspect of why land power and the Army matters out here. A second view is that the Army has a very, very long and deep history out here in the Pacific. You just don't hear about it much, we don't take credit for it much, and we don't talk about it much. But I talk about it a lot. So in World War II, the Marine Corps had 6 divisions out here and roughly 250,000. The Army had 6 corps out here, 21 divisions, and nearly 2 million people, 2 million soldiers, okay? In August alone, in 6 months, 1945, the Army did 45 amphibious landings in the Philippines alone. The Marine Corps did 15 in the entire war. So, we don't talk about it a lot. We don't give ourselves a lot of credit for it a lot, but land power is enormously important now in this region. And it is part of the joint force, and it's a central part of the joint force, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. And since the Second World War, in Korea, in Vietnam, and even today, we are learning, and we are experimenting, and we are exercising, and we are operating with our allies and partners because the Pacific is just a very, very unique battle lab to be able to learn, discover, succeed, fail, grow, and understand what's actually happening. It's very unique in that sense, and it's really, really important, the element of what you bring and what we're doing out here to try to create opportunities. So another reason why the Army exists here and what value it brings. So armies exist, particularly I would say the U.S. Army, to do 3 things. Armies seize, hold, and defend terrain. And again, on terrain, that's where people live. It's also where nations have their sovereignty. They protect their borders. Why do they protect their borders? They protect their borders because of the resources that exist there, and they also protect their people. And given the geography in this theater, what we're trying to do is we're trying to see and sense and understand first. in the environment and in the conditions that we are most likely to be called forward for in crisis or conflict. And then we're trying to command and control at scale. And then after that, we need to sustain and protect the joint force. And then after that, we can have a discussion about fires and maneuvers. But often the conversation is we're going to talk fires and maneuver, but the reality is we really need to see, sense, and understand what's going on, size up what's actually happening, place command and control forward, sustain and protect the joint force. Then we can have a discussion about what are we going to do with fire and maneuver or maneuver and fires. My secretary, Secretary Wormuth, has recently referred to the Army as the linchpin of the joint force in this theater. And why are we the linchpin of the joint force in this theater? Well, in my command, there are 13 general officer commands that span over and exist to conduct command and control, sustainment, air and missile defense, medical, engineering, civil affairs, contracting, and I could go on and on. Those commands bring scale, and they bring scale to complex organizations because that's what the Army does. We can be multinational, coalition, international, interagency, and joint overnight. That's what our command and control capacities do. We have very, very large divisions. We have very, very large corps. We have very, very large theater army headquarters, and command and control is a really, really important element of what we do. There's a paper that the Army War College presented a number of years ago, and in that paper, the name of the paper was Too Little at the Top. And what it talked about was, after war, the tendency in the United States Army is to take headquarters down. Why? Because they're filled with generals, colonels, and they're like, we don't need all these headquarters, get rid of the headquarters. Yet, when war breaks out, what's the first thing you need? You need headquarters. You need command and control. And I'm distinctly using the term command and control because it's different than a headquarters. A headquarters sounds like a lot of overhead, but command and control and the capacity to command and control large and complex operations require headquarters. Headquarters don't grow overnight. We can literally get junior enlisted soldiers very rapidly and train them. But you can't grow a major, a lieutenant colonel, a CW3, CW4, and senior non-commissioned overs overnight. They take decades to build. So these headquarters that command and control large, complex operations at scale, they're largely in the headquarters, and we've proven it time and time again. So what are we doing about this? What's the Army doing out here? Well, there's two kind of big efforts that we have underway. The first is the Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Center. So as many of you may be aware, the Army has a training center in Europe. The Army has 2 training centers in the continental United States. We are building a training center out here in the Pacific called JPMRC. JPMRC is a live, virtual, and constructive environment that we're going to set up here in Hawaii, set up in Alaska at the Yukon and Donley training area. Why? Because the conditions that exist in Alaska and conditions that exist in Hawaii look an awful lot like the region that we have to operate in. They do not look like Louisiana and California. Okay? Alaska, high altitude, extreme cold weather and mountainous. Hawaii, tropic, jungle, and an 8-island archipelagic environment that we need to be able to operate. And oh, by the way, they're all surrounded by joint assets, right? Joint base Pearl Harbor Hickam. There's plenty of joint capabilities here for us to train and operate together. And by the way, up in Alaska around Eielson and Elmendorf, right, there's joint assets that are in Alaska. So the ability for us to be able to train, create joint interoperability, create joint readiness at JPMRC in Alaska and Hawaii is really important. And then we're going to have a third branch of this to be able to export it, JPMRC X, into the region. Last year we did it into Indonesia, into an exercise called Garuda Shield. So we can bring the live, virtual, and constructive environment into training centers into the region. Australia is building a training center. The Philippines wants to build a training center. Indonesia is building a training center on the island of Sumatra, Java, and Borneo. And so there's a thirst in the region for training centers because they see the value of being able to come together and operate. So that's what we're doing as sort of the first pillar of the Theater Army JPMRC here in Alaska, Hawaii, and then an exportable version. The second thing we're doing is Operation Pathways. So you might have heard this formally as Pacific Pathways. Operation Pathways is our campaign design for the theater. It's going to take ready forces out of our training centers at JPMRC, and we're going to project it into the region. We're going to project it into the region to conduct primarily two things. We're going to exercise with our allies and partners in the region, and then we're going to experiment with new capabilities in the region. We're doing some experimenting today over the Philippines with high-altitude balloons. We're doing some adaptations with hybrid cloud. The PACPED Center that we're building back here and the HPIC Innovation Center tied to it. All these types of activities we want to be pushing into the region and being able to take new technology, new concepts, new organizations, place them in the region, begin to test them out during exercises, learn, succeed, discover, fail, grow, but understand what we get as a result of exercising and experimenting while exercising literally all the time. So two things we're doing, JPMRC, a training center here in Hawaii and Alaska, and an exportable version to tie together live, virtual, and constructive. And then the second one is Operation Pathways as our operational design to project forces into the region, exercising and experimenting. So let me transition a little bit to what we're doing in my headquarters relative to technology. So we have rapidly advanced some, I will just say, some data and technology agendas. We have a concepts directorate that we're standing up in the headquarters. I just hired a chief data officer for the headquarters because at this level, we're going to need a data officer in our headquarters to get some skilled expertise and understanding of what we're doing in the headquarters across the region. We're trying to place a payload of sensors in the region, in the terrestrial layer, both manned and unmanned. I mean, I think we have plenty of work that's going on in the space layer, plenty of work that's going on in the aerial layer. We need some work in the terrestrial layer. And I just had a conversation yesterday, I think, with the director at DISA on this. So, you know, often, and I hear many debates about pouring more money into the space layer, pouring more money into the aerial layer. We need things on the ground. On the ground, cables, downlink terminals, and other location or other types of capabilities on the ground that can be secured, and they don't require, all they require is security and protection. They do not depend on what weather is over the top of them. What weather is over the top of them. If anybody's been following the operations in Europe, weather's been a problem. Well, guess what? Weather out here is going to be a problem too. In fact, 8 out of 10 natural disasters in the world happen in this region. So I am and will remain a ground guy, and the terrestrial layer is what we need, and we need your help with things on the terrestrial layer so we can extend, have an agile, meshed, distributed network so we can talk, communicate, conduct command and control of very, very complex joint multinational operations. We have to have an open architecture. The architecture has to be transport agnostic. It's got to be data centric. And we have to be able to come up with some hybrid cloud solutions, and we got to come up with them fast. I know they're out there. We need your help. And we need to be able to take concepts and organizational redesigns that are happening in my command and then match them with science and technology and match them with what industry can provide. And hopefully we'll come up with some better ways of operating or more effective ways of operating so we can be efficient with the resources that we do bring to bear. A couple of things that we're trying to do as it relates to that. So U.S. Army Pacific is going to host Project Convergence in 22 on a Pacific scenario. So we intend to do that, and we're working with Army Futures Command to do that. On the JPMRC front, just to kind of back up and tell you where we're going, we have executed 2 rotations, one here in Hawaii. We just finished one in Alaska. It was like 10 below zero or 20 below zero. And then last year we did one in Indonesia. We intend to do the same thing this coming fall here in Hawaii. Another one in Alaska in the February, March timeframe. And then right now we're I won't announce it here, but there'll be at least 2 or 3 countries that are looking for us to bring the exportable version into the region in 22 or early 23. The environment that we're in right now is absolutely dangerous. It's moving. There's a lot of activity. Much of the activity is out in the open source, and so you're able to get an enormous amount of information relative to what's actually happening. I would just express to all of you that I think 2022 is going to be a year we're going to have to, it's going to be a very eventful year, I'll say, okay? But I actually think that 23, 24, and 25 are very concerning. The 20th Congress for President Xi will be held in the fall. He'll get through the 20th Congress, but they bear watching in 23, 24, 25, and beyond, again, because of the way they have accelerated the activities and the behaviors that they have undertaken in really the last 25 to 30 years, but more acutely here in the last number, I would say 5 to 8 years. So we need your help. We need your help innovating. We need your help matching industry and the military, matching tech, science, and innovative solutions with the day-to-day grind of campaigning that we have to do out here in the theater. We don't have a whole lot of time to slow down, and so in some respects, we've got to catch you and you've got to catch us. And we've got to work together to be able to do that, because otherwise we're not going to come up with creative solutions on our own. But as a group, we will do that. I'd ask all of you to think through the implications, at least, of what you bring and what forums like this bring, where you bring shared ideas together about outcomes. And I would tell you that, in my view, that the fight that's unfolding right now is a glimpse into the future, but the next fight, not that this one is not, in my view, is going to be it's going to be very unpredictable. It's going to be very violent. It's going to be very human, and it's going to be very long. And I believe that the only way for us to fight and counter that is as a joint force. And we're going to have multi-domain capabilities. We're going to have to provide them from every direction, so all 4 directions, all 5 domains, all 4 directions, all 3 dimensions, the human, the physical, and the information dimension. And then we're going to have to put it on all 3 layers, on the terrestrial layer, on the aerial layer, and on the space layer. If we can do that, and that's a tall task, if we can do that as a joint force with our greatest counterweight to all of the destabilizing activities in the region with our allies and partners, that is the greatest counterweight to what the Communist Chinese Party are doing and what the PLA is doing specifically in this region, in my view. So I'll stop there, and I'll pause for any questions that you might have, or if you want me to elaborate on anything that I said here today. So anyways, again, just thanks for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come down and talk with you, and I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. We have time for a couple of questions. First one, do you see the Army having a permanent footprint in Australia like the Marines do?
No, I don't. No, I see this, us rotating. I see us dynamically employing. I see us operating with the Australian Army. I see us operating as a joint force down there. Talisman Sabres are great. example of a enormously important multinational exercise. I will say this about, I was recently in Australia. In fact, you get me at a pretty good time. I physically was in Australia, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia. And while I was in Malaysia, I met with 4 other countries in the region in bilats. And then when I came back to Hawaii, the Japanese Chief of Army was here for a couple of day visit. So I guess what I'd say is I'm pretty current on my engagements, at least with the chiefs of army in the region. So more specifically to Australia, what I would express to everybody here is that while the headline grabber is AUKUS, and then below AUKUS, I think there's 5, but I'll rattle off 4 of the subcomponents of AUKUS is the US, or the US, UK, and Australia doing work together on robotics, AI, machine learning, and quantum computing. What's not in the papers is the fact that the Australian Army has made a substantial investment into essentially a number of the ground combined arms maneuver systems that the U.S. Army already has. The M1 tank, the payload of rotor wing aviation that the U.S. Army has with Blackhawks, Chinooks, and Apaches, our HIMARS, mobile rocket systems. So, I mean, I am very, very encouraged by my recent visit to Australia and the fact that they're making pretty substantial down payments on ground maneuver systems for their Army, and those systems are ones that we already have. The second part of it is up in the northeast corner of Australia, in an area around Townsville, Rockhampton, and Shoalwater Bay, is an enormously very, very good training area for a combined arms maneuver. It's large, it's got an amphib landing locations, it's got docks, it's got a drop zone, it's got really expansive terrain. And they are building a training center there in the northeast corner of Australia. That training center, much like the one that I'm talking about with JPMRC, and we're already talking to them about linking the live, virtual, and constructive elements of that training center to their training center back here in Hawaii or in Alaska. And so being able to create a synthetic, live, virtual, and constructive environment where we can put live US, Australian, and other country forces in the field, and then have a virtual construct for staffs at echelon to be able to go into a CPX mode. You know, you're talking about a wholly different level of training between U.S., Australian, and other multinational armies or joint forces that come and participate in exercises like Talisman Sabre. So while I don't see the Army with a permanent footprint there, I see the U.S. Army continuing to train and operate much like we have for the better part of our long history together with the Australian Army.
Thank you, sir. We'll squeeze in one more. We've heard some uniformed seniors express strong interest in fully automated AI, humans out of the loop to speed the kill chain. In your view, how do we get to the trust threshold so that commanders can apply fully automated AI?
Well, I mean, I think you know, I think the more that we put tools in the hands of commanders and staffs at different echelons, the more we're going to be able to get humans in the loop comfortable with the tools. So, you know, actually this question is a fairly common question. But I think the answer is roughly the same. And I'll just come to a simple analogy. If you didn't grow up with a weapon, you know, you're not comfortable the first time you go to the range. You have to use the weapon. And you get much more comfortable the more you use the weapon, changing the magazine, cleaning it, disassembling it, assembling it. And so even when the weapon is got some corrosion on it, there's problems with the weapon, you can overcome a jam or some malfunction in the weapon because you know how to apply that weapon. So it's no different than AI. The tools that are coming, they have to get into the hands of the user. Otherwise, they're not going to be comfortable trying to disassemble the information that comes through these tools. So when the humans get comfortable with it, then we can have less humans doing stuff. But until the humans are comfortable with it, you're going to have a lot of people doing it. I hope that, I don't know, maybe weapons have been kind to me, so I'll say that about weapons. I'm getting the hook. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Yeah.
Yes, please. Well, thank you, General Flynn. You had an extremely busy day today, and making time for us was really important. So on behalf of the AFCEA International, AFCEA Hawaii, we're very appreciative of your words today. I have known General Flynn for a number of years, and every time you see him in whatever job he's in, he is a leader of change, if nothing else. And I was with the Undersecretary of the Army 2019, AUSA. We had a meeting, and at the end I said, "Sir, what's your most challenging complex facing you today?" And in a nanosecond, he said, "Data." Yeah. And General Flynn stood up a task force that took on the data chain of not an easy solution, but long-range precision fires. But he brought that team together. So, and today we heard from him again, the change is here. So it's an honor. And so on behalf of, again, AFCEA International, AFCEA Hawaii, we're going to make a donation to the Friends of the Windward Wounded Warriors. Oh, wow. For your presentation today, so thank you. And of course, Challenge Coin, representing the 36th TechNet Indo-Pacific. So again, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, just as a reminder, at 4:15 there will be a women's leadership panel titled Senior Cyber Leaders Discuss Artificial Intelligence, Machine Learning, Challenges Followed by Women in AFCEA reception that everyone is invited to.
Ma parking lot. Wanna meet, I've been waiting all this time to give my love into somebody else. Never giving up till she know how I felt. Don't wanna mess around, don't wanna play no games. Wanna let you know my love will never ever change. I wanna love her till the day I die. Something's telling me the feeling's right. She gives me love, she gives me more than I need, more than I need. She holds me close, always there for me when I need her the most. She gives me love, she gives me more than I need, more than I need. She holds me close, yes. When I come home, later in the evening time, can't wait to see, she's the one that's on my mind. Just wanna sit and talk a while, just wanna make my baby